The trial of British businessman Shrien Dewani resumed in the Western Cape High Court this morning. Proceedings began with arguments from the state and defence over the admissibility of evidence from male escort Leopold Lisser. Judge Traverso was cut short Lisser's testimony yesterday, questioning its relevance to the case. State Prosecutor Adrian Mop has argued that he will not lead evidence of a sexual nature, but rather show that the two were in constant communication with each other. Mop says the communication extended to December 2010, when the accused was in a relationship with Annie. But defense advocate Peter Buerta has argued that it's not in dispute that Dewani was bisexual. He's argued that the two were not in a relationship other than having had 3 sexual encounters. Taxi driver Zola Tongo is now back on the witness stand. The trial continues. SABC reporter Vanessa Puna is at the Western Cape High Court attending the proceedings. She now joins us live for an update on today's proceedings. Vanessa, a very good afternoon to you. Now, the last time we spoke yesterday, the judge was to hear arguments on whether or not to admit the testimony by Lisser into evidence. What came out of that dispute, Vanessa?
Yes, this morning both the defence as well as the state argued before Judge Jeanette Traverso. She had yesterday requested that they provide her with written argument, and this morning they made those submissions in court. After a few minutes by each side, Judge Jeanette Traverso called a short adjournment, came back and ruled that she will not admit certain evidence by Mr. Lisser. Now, a lot of that evidence has to do with the communication and interactions between himself and Shrien Dewani. What then happened was that Mr. Lisser was allowed back in the witness stand, but he then promptly continued his testimony around the 7th of December when he first saw on television that his former client, Mr. Dewani, had been arrested. He then also told the court that on the advice of a friend, he then contacted the police and that he'd also sold his story to the Sun newspaper in Britain. So Mr. Lisser's testimony regarding exactly what he had, or rather what Shrien Dewani had told him about his conflicted feelings about getting married, that evidence was not allowed in court. And then also for the most part of today, we saw taxi driver Zola Tongo back on the witness stand. Mr. Tongo is currently serving a sentence of 18 years after he admitted to police in a plea agreement his involvement in the murder of Annie Dewani. Now, what we saw in court today was a series, really, of video clips taken from CCTV footage from the Cape Grace Hotel. Firstly, in the first session, we saw Mr. Tongo dropping off Shrien Dewani and Annie, his wife, at the Cape Grace Hotel after the arrival in Cape Town from the airport. And then also later on in the day, we were shown video clips of the Cape Grace Hotel again, CCTV footage taken where Mr. Dewani and Zola Tongo had quite lengthy discussions, and this would be the night into the early morning and the next day after Annie Dewani's body was found in the shuttle taxi in Khayelitsha. So the majority of today we've spent listening to Mr. Tongo's intimate and detailed accounts of what had taken place, how the kidnapping was planned, his allegations that Mr. Dewani had masterminded it at a cost of 15,000 rand, and then also his exit from the vehicle near the police barracks in Gugulethu on the night that Annie Dewani was killed.
Vanessa, now going into tomorrow, what can we expect? And at this stage, do you know who the next witness will be, or are they still very secretive about the witnesses, as you mentioned the other day?
Yes, look, the state is not really saying exactly who they'll be calling next. I do expect that Shrien Dewani, that's the state prosecutor, will still have some questions for Zola Tongo when court resumes tomorrow morning. Cross-examination could go ahead tomorrow, and then it's very hard to say how long the defence will keep Mr. Tongo on the stand. You'll know that he started yesterday, he spent most of today giving his evidence, and he's known to be the state's star witness. So not only will the state try and keep him on the stand for as long as they can, to elicit as much information from him as they can, I'm certain that the defence will also try and keep Mr. Tongo on the stand, and really their aim is to totally discredit exactly what he's told the court here, and he said quite a lot in his evidence in chief. So we could see cross-examination taking for the rest of this week. And as for who exactly the state will be calling next, Difficult one to say. I would expect that at some point the investigating officer, Mr. Paul Hendrickse, will be called to testify. It's just not been confirmed as yet by the state at this point. And no, they're not speaking about who the witnesses are on the list at this stage.
That's Vanessa Puna live to us from the Western Cape High Court at the Shrien Dewani murder trial.